Welcome to the American Grown Podcast, hosted by Austin Sullivan. The American Grown Podcast will focus on people from different walks of life and their journey to where they are now. Now, turn up your volume and settle in for a great episode.
Hi, I'm Austin Sullivan. This is the American Grown Podcast, recorded inside the Colortech Creative Solutions studios. Today, we have Adam Kuhn. He is a State Farm agent with 6+ years under his belt. Adam, welcome to episode 19 of the American Grown Podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
And like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. I saw you brought Jake.
Oh, yeah, he had to come along.
I'm
he
so
absolutely
glad.
had to come along.
So glad you brought him. He's taller than I expected.
Yeah, it's life size, so he's our office mascot, so I had to bring him along.
Perfect. I saw him in some commercials recently. He almost looks too good, if that makes sense. He looked almost robotic. His face was so sharp, no blemishes. It's a good mascot you got there.
Yeah, he's a really, really good guy. State Farm actually hired him specifically because he tested really well with people, and kids really like him. And I'm actually really jealous because some of my agent intern friends from back in the spring when I was going through my internship to be an agent, they actually got to meet him when we were out in Vegas.
Really?
Yeah, and I didn't get a chance to because he wasn't staying in the hotel that I was. But some of my friends ran into him, and they said, by all accounts, really nice guy. His name is Kevin Miles. He's an actor in Hollywood.
Oh, right.
Jake is his main thing, but he's in like some TV shows and some fringe things, and he's like an actor on the come up. But yeah, by all accounts, really good guy. State Farm is, very protective of their brand, so they wanted to make sure they had somebody who was going to represent it in the right way, and he does a great job.
Well, that's cool. Get a little background on Jake from State Farm. It'd be great if I don't know if there's ever an opportunity, but it'd be cool to have like his autograph on that cut out there. And all the pictures of this will be up on social media, on Facebook and Instagram, American Grown Podcast. But let's get into it. Yeah, your parents, Yvonne and Mike Kuhn. Tell me about them and growing up here in Lebanon City.
I grew up smack dab in the middle of Lebanon City, for lack of a better term, in the middle of all the chaos on Chestnut Street in between Walnut and Cumberland 422. So there's always commotion or something going on where I grew up, so I just got numb to it and very used to it. People of all walks of life walking up and down the streets or wherever I was going, so I just got used to that at a very young age. But as far as my parents go, yeah, very lucky to be born to the two of them. Two great people who do a lot for, not only my siblings and I, but for the community. And two role models in my life. I probably don't tell them that enough. They've done a lot for me, and growing up in the middle of Lebanon City was definitely interesting because I grew up around, and I went to Harding Elementary School, so which was a block down the street from where I grew up in Park Place, which is a very historic neighborhood in Lebanon. I grew up in this old 100-year-old Victorian house that I've grown to appreciate even more as an adult. I hope my parents never get rid of it. That was interesting because I grew up around a lot of people who maybe didn't have it as good as I did, or maybe were had things a little bit better than what I had, but it was an interesting mix. And my parents wanted all of us, to go to Lebanon School District for that reason, to get exposed to all different kinds of walks of life that you might not get in a different school district. They made that decision before we were born. I think I did nothing but benefit from it. And that was my little world. Harding's a block away. My house is, right down the street. My dad works at Good Samaritan Hospital, so he's, 2 blocks up the street. And that was like my whole little world. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom growing up. Mm-hmm. She didn't go to college, and by the time we got to middle school, she decided she wanted to be a realtor. Kind of just decided to take that up with no experience, and here we are years later. She's doing really well.
I was going to say, I think that's how I first met your mom. Was through real estate. She put an ad in the school sports programs that we do here.
Yep.
As long as I've known her, she's always been a kick-ass real estate agent, killing it, honestly. So that's interesting to hear her background of being a stay-at-home mom and then to where she is now.
Yeah. And she worked at the Lebanon Daily News before I was born, and kind of got started there. But it really wasn't a career per se. But then she got married to my dad, had us, and just decided to stay at home. And I was really lucky to be in a home where I had two parents who could do that, because I realized not everybody is. I didn't appreciate or understand it at the time. A lot of kids do have parents that they either have only one parent in the household, or both parents have to go to work, and they need to go to daycare or SAC or some sort of after-school program. And their life was different than mine, where my mom was always waiting for me at the bottom of the steps at Harding to pick me up, and eventually I could just walk home when I got a little older. But I really benefited from that, and I know it just, the environment that my parents created for me, I appreciate it so much more now, because I realize not everybody has the same setup that I did. I grew up, in a household with not only two great parents, but two parents who provided a lot for me, and also provided a lot of opportunities that not a lot of people that I grew up around had. I mean, we went on vacation every year to Ocean City, New Jersey. We have a house there now, but we always used to go on vacation there 2 weeks religiously every year. I mean, we've been on family vacations outside of the country. I've been to Duke camp a couple times. I'm a big Duke basketball fan. I know there's some people out there going to be laughing at me because of the way things ended with Coach K. That was tough to see. But yeah, I was a kid who was lucky enough to do things like that. And I, grew up around a lot of kids who didn't get an opportunity like that. And I didn't think of it much then, but now looking back, my parents gave me a better upbringing in life than even what they had growing up. And now I look at that and say, how can I do that same thing for my kids one day?
Yeah, for the next generation,
Yeah. So they've instilled great values in me, and they've also just given me a perspective that, I want to do the same exact thing that they did.
It's interesting because, you hear some people, I want to get out of the city, or they want to get out of Lebanon in general. They don't even want to be here. They want to go to, California, Texas, Florida, whatever, New York, just leave Pennsylvania in general. But your parents, before you were even born, were like, hey, we're going to stay local. Our kids are going to go to Lebanon High and kind of see both sides of the coin, like you said. Now, when you were in school, was there anyone that helped you along the way? Any teachers, any coaches?
Yeah, I mean, at all different levels of school, elementary all the way up. I mean, there's some names that stick out, especially a guy like John Newmaster. I don't know if you know him or not. He was involved with friendship football, Lebanon Biddy basketball, and even Fifth Ward baseball that I played in. So he was my coach every season for something different, but he's a guy that really comes to mind for me. Every time he moved out of the area because of work, but he does come back to town occasionally, and every time I see him, I go up and give that guy a big hug. I really respect that guy. He's given years of his life to kids that, I mean, has nothing to really show for it, never really got anything out of it, but he's a giver. And same thing with Bubba Bartle. I don't know if you know him. He was one of my football coaches growing up for friendship football. He's been coaching he stopped now. He's been coaching for years, and even Warren Schwank, Bumps.
I've heard of him.
Noah brought him up when he, shout out to Noah.
Yep.
Since I listened to his podcast here, he brought him up too. He's still coaching right now, and he's involved with Lebanon Biddy basketball. I don't know if he was ever my specific coach. He was always coaching kids younger than me, but he's still involved, and he's still refereeing and coaching and doing whatever the Lebanon basketball program basically asks of him. And I got to work with him for the first time this last winter. I was refereeing for first and second graders, Lebanon Biddy basketball, program that I grew up playing in. I made a decision last fall that I wanted to do something outside of work for my community, for lack of a better term, something outside of work. I know I help a lot of people at work with a lot of things, but I wanted to do something else. So I decided to get involved with Biddy basketball on the weekends. So I'd get up every Saturday morning and do that all morning into the afternoon. So that was really rewarding, and it was nice to give back and help a bunch of kids in the same program that helped me get to where I am. That was a huge part of my life in my early upbringing. But those are some people there. Some other people in middle school, Ted Thompson, I know he's another one that Noah brought up. He was a great coach that we had, and he was also our teacher in high school and in middle school. But another guy that really stood out to me was Scott Sanders. Again, another person Noah brought up. He was probably the best basketball coach I ever had in 10th grade. He coaches like a drill sergeant.
Okay.
He's very, very tough on you. But there's nothing more rewarding than doing something right for him, especially in a game, because, you know, like the tough love on the other side, especially during practice, it's rewarding to get the love back in a different way when he tells you did something right. He was a guy that really whipped me into shape a little bit in 10th grade, and every time I see that guy, it's usually at a brewery that I run into him.
Yeah.
But every time I see him, I give him a handshake and a big hug because I really respect him a lot. And then some people, you know, in my football circle, for lack of a better term, because I did play football all the way up through, Carl Lidka, who was a coach of mine and also my guidance counselor in high school. Great guy. Jerry Yanchuk, he's no longer at Lebanon. He's at Central York now, but I just went to see one of his games a few weeks ago. They were playing Hempfield, so it was cool to get to see him again. And Bud Getz, who recently passed away here in Lebanon, he was a little bit of a coaching icon. He made a huge difference in my life. I remember I was on the verge of not playing football my senior year because practice sucks.
Okay, right.
I wasn't sure if I was going to play, and I just didn't have a ton of confidence. One of the determining factors was walking past a guy like him in the hallway and having him just look at me with a scowl of disappointment.
Yeah. You don't want to let him down.
Yeah, and he was my defensive coordinator, and that's the side of the ball that I played. I played defense.
I was going to ask you. Okay.
Yeah, so I ended up being a safety, which I love that position. I love to hit people.
Yeah.
That was my thing. But I ended up playing and then didn't play the first 2 games, but then got in and started after that, and I never looked back and ended up being an all-county safety.
Wow, there
that
you go.
year. I led the league in interceptions.
That's crazy. And you weren't going to go out. You were
No, and ended up winning a bunch of awards, and it was kind of unbelievable because I didn't, you know, fully believe in myself, but then somebody like Coach Getz, who kind of stayed on me every day, coaching me up, and gave me also, like Coach Sanders, a lot of tough love. There was nothing more rewarding. I made a post about this, and the Lebanon Daily News shared it. Pat Huggins put it in his story, but there was nothing more rewarding, you know, going out there on a Friday night and playing your butt off, for lack of a better term, and having Coach Getz come up to you and say, like, you played a hell of a game, when you're surrounded by your family and friends on the field after the game. That made me feel so good. And part of the reason why my post got shared also is because he reached out to me a couple years ago. It was during COVID. He made a Facebook account. I don't know if he knew how to use it so well, but he figured out how to message me, and he just messaged me like a happy birthday and just said, you know, you were one of my favorite players that I ever coached, and a couple other nice little messages in there. And it was just, it felt so good to hear it from him more than anybody else, because he was the one who was probably the hardest on players. Very, very tough love, but those are the most rewarding people to hear that you did something right from.
Oh, for sure. I would agree 100%. And it makes you, as a player now, you know, as an adult, you know, having your own business and everything, you can appreciate that more, you know, because one, the tough love, but yet when you get that credit, that validation, like, hey, you played a great game, a hell of a game, or you closed a big sale, a big deal, you can appreciate it more. And you know, you look at those people, those mentors, as a big impact in your life. So now, from high school and from Lebanon City, you moved to the city of brotherly love. Go Birds! Hopefully when this comes out, they'll still be undefeated. That'd be fantastic. But you went to Temple University. What was that like?
So I got to Temple being probably one of the biggest overachievers you ever will meet. I was one of those kids who was not satisfied if my GPA was below 4.0.
Whoa.
I always wanted to be on the superior honor roll.
Yeah. You're a go-getter.
I actually wanted my GPA to be above 4. I graduated 4th in my class. I'm still bitter about it.
Fourth, come on. No, I'm just
no,
messing with you. That's awesome, Crudy. Holy cow.
No, and that's not even something to brag about anymore because it really doesn't matter that much now that we're this far removed. But I still think about it once in a while if Christian Eisenhower brings it up. He finished second, and he still talks about it sometimes. But yeah, I was definitely what you would call an overachiever and probably maybe did a little bit more than I was supposed to, but I mean, that's how I was. Got to Temple. I just decided to go there because I had two cousins that one had already graduated and one was already there. Mm-hmm. So they kind of laid the groundwork for me. I visited and stayed over for a weekend with my cousin Jen back when I was a senior in high school to check it out. And she stayed in this really cool apartment building that her older brother, Michael, stayed in. And I was like, wow, this is really cool. It was an old factory building, a high rise with ceilings that were over 20 feet high. It was a huge, huge space. And when you looked out the windows, you see the entire landscape of the city and the skyline. And you just get these really, really cool views. And at Temple, you don't have to live in a dorm as a freshman. When I did that, I had gone and visited some other schools, but I was like, this is where I want to be. I want to be in this big city. I don't know if I'll ever live in a big city again. I don't want to be at a school where the town that you're in revolves around the school. No offense to any of those schools. I think they're cool. There's a bunch of schools out there. Like Penn State's a great example. I considered going there. It just wasn't the vibe for me, even though I've visited plenty of times and had a lot of fun. But it wasn't for me. I wanted something a little different than that. So I wanted the city at my fingertips, that the city doesn't revolve around Temple. It's kind of the opposite. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I ended up going there and went to the Fox School of Business. And I was undeclared my first 2 years. I didn't know what the heck I wanted to do. But I ended up deciding on MIS, Management Information Systems, which I had the introductory course that everybody has to take in the business school, and then I ended up liking it, and I decided, okay, I'm going to pick this at the end of my sophomore year. So I went with that, figuring I'm either going to like this and find a career in it, or I'll just figure it out. So that's what I did, and went there. Ended up becoming a manager of the basketball team. I certainly wasn't good enough to play Division I basketball. I played in high school. But yeah, my dad had a connection to Pat Flannery, who was the Bucknell coach. He used to coach at Lebanon Valley College when they won the national title back in '94. He ended up being the coach at Bucknell. My dad was good buddies with him, and he was good buddies with an assistant at Temple. So he reached out to him and said, hey, like, you should bring Adam on. He's a good guy. I know him.
Yeah.
Give him a job in the program, even if it's unpaid. Just give him something to do. So I sat down and talked to Coach Duke, is his name. And he asked me, like, what do you want to do? I said, I don't really care. I just want something to do that's outside of school, because other than my studies and doing like intramural basketball and flag football, I don't really have that much else going on. Yeah. So I said I kind of want just some other commitment that isn't going to bog down my schedule, maybe a couple days a week, whatever that fits in. And he said, yeah, why don't you just become a manager? We'll bring you on and work like 3 days a week. It's unpaid, but he said, we'll give you a bunch of things to do, and the grad assistants will basically be your boss and tell you what to do. My junior and senior year, I was a manager for the team, and I was at practice 3 days a week usually, and participating and helping guys with drills, doing whatever they needed me to do, helping with laundry, cleaning up, manning the front desk, people coming in and out who were visitors, doing kind of like secretary work. Sometimes an NBA team would be walking in to get like a shoot around going because they were playing the Sixers. So yeah, there's one day like the Sacramento Kings walked in. So
nice.
Yeah, so that was pretty interesting. I got to travel with the team though. I remember going on a trip up to Yukon, and just to be on the road with the team and managing their equipment, sitting right behind the bench for a game, like in the XL Center while they're playing Yukon. Like that was a really cool experience. I got to meet Doug Gottlieb, who works for CBS, or maybe he's at ESPN now. I can't remember, but he was at CBS at the time. Wow. So I got to meet him because he walked into the locker room. He had to go to the bathroom before the game, so that's how I got to meet him. It was a really cool experience. I'm glad I got to do it because I made a ton of friends doing it. And one of my buddies here from Lebanon actually did it with me, Matt Kleinfelder. He went to Lebanon Catholic. He lived with me at Temple, so we both were like, hey, why not? Let's do this. So we had a blast. That was a great experience, and I would do it all over again the same way.
Be that close to, like you said, D1 athletes in their prime. Such a small world with the connections from your father to help you, and then of course you proving yourself by showing up and doing what was asked of you, whether it was laundry or shooting around with the players or whatever it was. Do you have a specific moment that was like during your time with the team that you're like, oh, this is awesome?
Coolest thing was actually becoming buddies with some of the players, getting to the point where I would text with them and be like, hey, do you want to go to the gym at like 10 o'clock? Because I had, with my swipe card, my student swipe card gave me access to get into the practice facility, which is state of the art. This Temple has a really nice basketball facility. I had 24-hour access to get in and out whenever I wanted. So I could go and use like their study rooms if I wanted to, or hang out in the locker room, or I could just go in there and grab a basketball and shoot around if I wanted to. But some of the players would text me and be like, hey, like I'm not doing anything, like 10 o'clock, you want to go in the gym and like rebound for me and work me out? I'd be like, heck yeah, like I'm down for that. So
that's so cool, yeah.
Yeah, so there I would go. I would walk, up the street from my apartment and go into the facility 10 o'clock at night. I'd plug my phone in, and they had a really, really nice speaker system wired all throughout the gym. So I'd plug my phone in, and we'd put some rap or hip hop music on and just blast it, and then we would just start working out. And sometimes Matt would go with me actually, and one of us would rebound, and then another one of us would actually guard the player and like body him up a little bit and make it difficult for him to shoot.
Okay.
We'd come up with all different weird kind of drills for them to do, just on the cusp.
Test them, right? Really test them out. Yeah.
But yeah, they really appreciated us because they knew we didn't have to, and we could be at home playing Xbox or screwing around or going to bed or whatever. If it was a weeknight, I'd be like, yeah, man, like I'm in.
Yeah, you care. It showed that you cared,
Yeah. So I haven't talked to any of the players in a while, but there were some that I got closer with than others that like just a random night they text me and be like, you want to come in? I'm like, yeah.
Let's go back too, because you mentioned Fox School of Business. I mean, as far as I know, that's fairly prestigious in business schools throughout PA.
It definitely is, and my major at the time was ranked like 13th in the country. Wow. It was really rigorous. Not to say that other schools aren't, because I mean, college is rigorous to begin with, but Fox is one of Temple's better schools for sure. And I mean, they put you through the ringer. Not even just my major, but if you're in the business school, there's certain classes you have to pass, and if you don't, you're basically out of the business school. And risk management and insurance is one of them. I still have nightmares about it to this day.
Really?
Temple is ranked like for risk management, like second in the country.
Okay.
And everybody has to take the prereq for risk management insurance. And I had this professor that was so tough, and you couldn't have your phone out. You couldn't have a laptop out. He was old school. He was from Texas. He was a hard ass. I have no other way to describe it. I didn't know if I was going to pass the class up until the last final. And there I was, like, home for winter break, waiting for my grades to come in, sweating every night for a week until they came in. But that was the hardest class that I ever took. And there were definitely classes for my major that were difficult because of how highly ranked MIS was. But risk management is the one that stands out to me. It's funny because I work in insurance now, but risk management is really more so for people who want to be like actuarial scientists, people who figure out like rates and the probability of things happening, which is like way above my head. Mathematical probabilities of things. But you got a little taste of it, and it was so hard. I have no other way. Like, it kept me up at night thinking about finals or quizzes. That fall semester of my junior year was not fun. I dreaded going to that class, and I put in extra time. Luckily, I still remember this so vividly. It was one night, like maybe a week after finals were over, and I was at home, and I checked my grades. It was like 11 o'clock at night, and I checked it, and I saw that I passed. I think I got like a B- or a C+
There you
in the
go.
class.
Yeah.
Like, it was good enough to pass.
That's all you need.
That's all that I needed. I was doing much better in my other classes, but that one I was like, I don't care.
Just
if I
pass.
pass,
Yeah.
I'm out of it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
And I checked and I saw it. I jumped out of my seat. I ran up to my parents' room and like they were asleep. I like jumped on their bed.
Yeah.
And I was like, I passed risk management. I'm done with it.
Like,
and my
what are you
mom
talking
was like,
about?
my mom thought it was an emergency, but she was like, oh my God, thank God. Because she knew how much I was going through it with that.
Stressing you. Yeah.
But yeah, that was something that I still think about to this day. Like, I still have nightmares about it.
Well, I'm glad you passed. And while you're at Temple, and even now in life in general, any mentors that you had, whether at school or life mentors in general? I know you brought a framed photo of your grandfather.
Oh yeah.
Which we'll get a picture of that, put it up on social media and all that. But tell me about your mentors.
Yeah, so I'll talk about him then eventually. But yeah, I would definitely say, like, to touch on my parents again, because I've watched how much they've done for others and putting others before themselves time and time again over the course of my life, and maybe didn't appreciate it as much when I was a kid and thought it was kind of annoying or an inconvenience because they'd pull me into something that I didn't want to do. But now I look back and it's a little different. But yeah, my parents for sure, I look at as mentors, and I probably wouldn't have admitted that, years ago as a kid. But even my brother and my sister too, in a different way. But they are people that I can confide in for different things, and it's a different relationship, obviously, than maybe your parents. But I look up to my brother and sister, and that's the first time, public record, that I'm admitting that.
And they're younger, right?
They are younger than me.
Yeah.
But they're both doing really well in their respective fields and provide different perspective to my life if I ever need something or need advice or whatever it might be. And I really appreciate them. So I kind of do look at them as mentors, kind of in like a different role a little bit. But two people who I also consider mentors that are not related to me, Hannah Spearall is definitely one. She brought me into the fold when she opened her State Farm agency back in 2016, and she and I go way back. It all really starts with her dad and my dad working together at Good Samaritan Hospital. This was before I was born. Her dad's Bob Phillips. He's another State Farm agent here in Lebanon. Before he was a State Farm agent, he worked at Good Samaritan Hospital, and my dad started working there in the late 80s, and they got to know each other, became friendly, and my dad ended up, in the 90s having a couple kids, and Bob obviously had two daughters, and so once we got a little older, we're like 5, 6, 7, 8 years old, my dad and my mom had places to go, and my dad was like, hey, like, would Hannah and her sister Maddie, would they mind like babysitting? So they ended up becoming our routine babysitters anytime my parents were going away at night somewhere, whether it was for a dinner or a function or whatever it was, or if they were just going out. Hannah and her sister Maddie were my babysitters. So my corny joke always was, when I worked in the Cleona office for Hannah, that I've known Hannah as my boss since I was at a very young age. So she was always the boss.
Yeah.
But she brought me into the fold. She contacted me in like the fall of 2015 when she found out she was going to get her own State Farm agency, and she was brought up in a State Farm household under her dad, and she also worked for Kelly Parks, who's the agent in Myerstown. So she found that out, and I apparently was the first person that she reached out to say, hey, like, I want to bring you in the fold here. And at the time, I was working in IT, but it really wasn't a career. I know there's careers in IT, but where I was at the time, I didn't view it as a career, and I was kind of looking for either a change or a different job or something. So when that fell out of the sky, I was like, I'm willing to listen to whatever you have to say. I know nothing about insurance. It's a little intimidating because I don't know anything about it, but I'm willing to listen. And she sat me down at Timeless Cafe and was like, hey, like, I think this is going to be a great opportunity for you. You have an opportunity to not only make more money, but interact with people and add value to their lives. And it's in a different role that I'm in now at the time, which was IT, where I'm just in the same office with the same people all day. And it's just
monotonous.
Yeah. So she's like, this is going to be completely different. And I didn't even blink. I was just like, yeah, I'm in. I want to do this. I see the opportunities that it's provided her dad, who's very well established now. And I said, that's very intriguing to me, and just the lifestyle that comes with it. And I said, you know what? I want to take a shot. And the thing that I really appreciate about her the most is she looked at me in the eye and said, I want to bring you on with the intent that you're leaving me one day.
Oh, wow.
And
wow.
that was really powerful.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? Like, that's something that a leader says.
Exactly.
So I said, yeah, I'm in. I'll do whatever it takes. So that's one person. And I ended up working for her for 5.5 years. And it was the only work experience I had other than the previous job after college, but it was the best work experience I had to that point. She created a great culture. We had a great staff in place, and I loved coming to work every day because I loved the people that I worked with. We joked around a lot and had just a great environment that if there were days where she was like, hey, you can leave early if you want to, there's not much going on, or if you want to come in late this day or something like that, I never did, because I always wanted to be there for that time because I loved the people that I worked with in there, like her, Andy, who's in there, and Mary Pagan, who's in there, Lebanon High grad. I loved working with them. So we had this work family that was awesome. I miss them dearly because I'm not around them anymore. I still talk to them a lot, but it's not the same. I loved working for her and with her, and she never made it seem like she was a boss. She made it seem like I was working with a coworker.
Okay.
Who just maybe had to divvy out some work to me or correct me or coach me, but I never felt like somebody was on top of me. She was definitely a mentor in my life. And then another person is Ed Lynch. He is Hannah's brother-in-law. I grew up next door to him. He bought the house next to my parents across Fifth Street. He was just always a guy that I confided in, maybe if I didn't want to talk to my parents about something, because he was younger than my parents. He's about 10 years or so older than me. So he kind of became this older brother role, for lack of a better term. I'm the oldest in my family. So I got to know him because in 7th grade, I would cut his grass, and I kind of had my own little lawn care business in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I always took care of his.
Entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Oh.
So that was my first job, was mowing lawns when I was like 12, 13 years old. And he was one of the first ones I started with. One, he was an easy target because he didn't have a shed, and he didn't have a...
He's an easy target.
And he didn't have a lawnmower.
Okay.
So like I was like, hey, like, I'll cut it $10 a week.
Yeah.
And he was like, sold.
Nice.
So I did that for years, all through middle school, high school, and college. That I did that for him. I got to know him more because a guy that my mom worked with, Chris Blauk, he's a mortgage lender in the area. He lived with him. My mom worked with him when she worked at Coldwell Banker out at Lebanon Valley Mall. It was across from Schuylkill Valley.
Wow.
Back when that was still there.
Yeah, that was a little while ago.
Yeah. But I got to know him through Chris, and he just became almost like this older brother figure in my life, a guy that I could confide in. If I was ever having problems or something was going on that maybe I didn't want to talk to my parents about, that I didn't have like an older brother-like figure in my life, that he kind of became that for me. And he was the guy that suggested to Hannah to hire me. He's done a lot for me. He's always been a mentor for me since I was, 9th grade, 10th grade. And I really, really respect him a lot. He's a great guy.
Awesome. Those two, right? Any others?
No, I mean, I can definitely talk about my grandfather a little bit, because I know you mentioned him and I brought the photo in here. I mean, he's unique because he's not someone who was always giving me advice or something like that. I mean, the part of his life that I was around for, he was much older. I mean, he lived to be 97 and a half years old.
Wow. Good life, for sure.
Yeah, he lived a long life. Great genes, I hope. He was a mentor to me in a different way because his acts played a role in my life, because people would share it with me. But he was a teacher and a coach at Harding Junior High School, which right down the street here, when I was a junior high, for 37 years. He was a swim coach at the country club, and even at Harding, he coached basketball, football, golf, baseball. And my dad actually put a list together one time, and he sat down with him. He coached over 150 seasons combined.
That's crazy.
So he's in the Lebanon High Hall of Fame.
Okay.
For that reason. But when you count the years of teaching and coaching and being at the country club and doing the coaching out there, it's thousands of kids that he interacted with over the course of this 40-year period. So I heard throughout my life, all these different people would just come up to me if I either said my name out loud or somebody saw my name like listed on something or something like that. If I had $1 for every time it happened to me, I don't know how much money I would have. People would always say like, "You're a Kuhn," or are you related to Mr. Kuhn? And I'd be like, well, which one? Because he had 7 kids, 6 of them were boys, so I don't know which one you're talking about, but yeah, I'm related to one of them, but which one? And they'd always say, well, Frank, and I'd be like, yeah, that's my grandfather. And then it would always lead into a story like, he was my favorite teacher that I had growing up, or he was my favorite coach, or I always looked forward to seeing him, or something that he did for them, or something to that extent. So I heard these stories growing up, and really in my childhood, I didn't think that much of it. I would hear it and be like, yeah, like that's great. But now I look at it so much differently now that he's gone, because I still hear it all the time.
Wow, this many years later.
Yeah,
he's impacted that many people.
Yeah, and it only really truly hit me, I would say, when we actually had his funeral services in August of 2015, and we had it at St. Cecilia's Catholic Church, which is the church that I grew up going to, because that's the church he always went to. So my dad was like, "That's where we're going." I've never seen anything quite like it. I've been to several funerals in my life, and you would have thought a politician or somebody like that with some stature had died, and I was just awestruck. The church was packed, but then there was a line of people just going around outside the door down the block.
Wow.
We had to extend the viewing part of the service for a couple hours because there were that many people
wanted to see
who came out of the woodwork to show up. I had never seen anything like it, and that was the first moment that all of these stories, all of these nice things that people shared with me, all these things throughout the course of my life that people would say to me because they knew him or interacted with him or he taught or coached them, it all came to life. And I'm standing there at the front of the church with the rest of my extended family members, and I'm seeing like Korean and Vietnam war vet age men like in tears, people who I didn't even know coming up to me, shaking my hand, giving me a hug, and I had to walk away at one point. I was like, holy smokes, right. I can't believe what he did and the impact he made just doing little things. He never did anything astronomical or some huge thing for anybody. It was just a culmination of a million little things that he had some sort of an impact on these kids. And I've heard so many stories over the years. I can remember one. Lebanon High School has a Hall of Fame induction every year for sports, for athletes.
Okay, yep.
It happens like usually in December, right as basketball season is kicking off, and they have a banquet, and usually like a couple hundred people show up, and then 5, 6, 7 people who are getting inducted get up on the podium and give a speech. And there was a year this guy got up there. His name was Ron Brewer. He was an incredible athlete, and he had my grandfather as a coach for a couple different sports. But he started going off on thanking all of these people for helping him get to where he was. He was named off teachers, coaches, and he goes, there's one that I want to mention later that I don't want to talk about right this second. So he keeps going on about his speech, and then he gets to the end, and he goes, and then there was Frank Kuhn, and he started just bawling profusely in front of hundreds of people, and my grandfather actually happened to be there, and he essentially said, I don't think he realizes how big of a family he really has, and nobody really knew what he meant. And he said, I didn't have a dad growing up.
Wow.
I didn't. And he said, Coach Kuhn was the closest thing that I had to, I can kind of feel it in my chest when I talk about it. He said he was the closest thing that I had to a father. Not only was he my coach, but He took me home from practice. He made sure I had a meal if my mom wasn't around. Like all these little things.
Yeah, but they add up. They add up to make a big impact.
And he basically said, I don't know where I would be if it wasn't for him, because I could have gone down a very wrong path. That really, really hit me. I've heard other stories very similar to that, of the impact that he made and the track that he made sure he kept people on. So that really makes a difference in my life. And that's definitely one subject, like I can feel it in my chest when I talk about
when you talk about it. You're passionate about it.
I feel because of that, like this little bit of a burden to, make sure that I'm doing right by people, and that I kind of I'm carrying that legacy a little bit.
Definitely. Just speechless. I mean, as long as I've known of your father or the last name Kuhn, it's always been, in a helpful way. Call Mike Kuhn at the Good Sam. He can help you out, or Yvonne with the real estate. And to hear about your grandfather, who I didn't know personally, but to kind of compare to in my life, my grandfather here started Colortech, Pat Sullivan, maybe cut from a similar cloth, where you were taught to treat everyone with the same respect, whether it's a janitor or the person holding the door for you, because you don't know their background, what they're going through. You treat everyone as if they're the CEO or the president. Similar.
Yeah, I remember my dad telling me there was somebody who was a water boy on one of his teams, and he approached my dad years later, and he just said, I miss seeing your dad because he treated me no differently than any of his players.
Yeah, that's huge.
And he made sure the players treated me equally.
Yeah.
And if they did not, there was a problem.
It's that respect.
Yeah. And I remember another person shared a story with my dad, and my dad shared with me. They said to my dad, I grew up with some disabilities early on in my life. Like I kind of stuttered when I talked, things like that. And he said, like, I got made fun of a lot, but he said, nobody made fun of me when Coach Kuhn was around. And he made sure of that. Stories like that I really take to heart, because it means something to me. And I feel like everybody should treat people that way, but I feel a little differently because everybody in this community knows who he is. So there's a little bit of a weight that I choose to carry on my shoulders because of that. And I feel like I'm going to carry that torch.
I applaud you for it, and I think you'll do a phenomenal job, at upholding the name and everything, seriously. So to segue over, and I think this is a perfect segue, what are you really passionate about?
I think it ties right into my family legacy. Like those stories that I brought up growing up, that event at the funeral, where it's like everything came to life, all those stories, all those nice things that people used to say to me over the course of my life, once they found out who I was. But that definitely is what gets me up in the morning, and it's something that makes me passionate, because making money is great. That's something that definitely you can say gets you up in the morning, for lack of a better term, because you have to go to work.
You have to, right.
But that wears out eventually. And if you don't have a why or a passion, I don't know what you're doing. And if you don't have something that drives you outside of that, I think like you can really get lost, and you might have to reassess a little bit.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly.
In addition to that, I've seen my parents give so much to the community, especially my dad, who worked at Good Samaritan Hospital. He had just recently stepped back from his role because he's in a different role now as the county commissioner, so he's actually giving back in a different way now. But he was at the Good Samaritan Hospital for 30 years, and he was the vice president of development, so he was essentially the guy in charge of making sure that our nonprofit local hospital here was funded, that had charitable donations coming in. What better person than him, because of the connections that my grandfather established and then he established in the community. So he was, it was really cool to see him pull together with Scott Seckler, who owns Bell and Evans. Made sure he and Scott came together, and he made sure that this donation came together to build the Seckler Family Cancer Center. So, and that was a huge donation. That was like the feather in his cap, for lack of a better term. But that was his role in our community, to make sure this local nonprofit, small to mid-sized hospital stays up and running with funds coming in, because not everybody that comes in and out of there is paying a bill.
Yeah. Right.
And that's just part of it. So
it's a necessity.
He played a critical role in doing that. And both he and my mom have been involved in several charitable organizations, like Kiwanis, the United Way, and some other ones that come to mind. But my dad is always at every Kiwanis, like pancake breakfast, especially involved with when the high school kids come out for Key Club. He's always there, serving tables, making pancakes. He still does it to this day.
That's awesome, yeah.
Just little things like that I've seen my parents do. I mean, perfect example too. There's a couple at the hospital that works there that they have special needs, and they need some help. And I remember my dad calling me one day and saying, "Hey, there's this couple at the hospital. They came to me. They bought a new TV stand. They need some help." So here I was with my dad going over to this house I've never been to before for these random people, helping them construct and build this TV stand in their bedroom and reattaching the TV and getting it all set up back again with cable and everything. I've seen my dad do things like that for people over the years, just random people in Lebanon City who he doesn't even know. That to me is something that kind of gets me going, because now that I have the platform that I do, I want to do those things too and put my own spin on it. So I'm definitely looking to do things like that. The more the time I have with my agency, the more I build it out. I want to do different community outreach things, giving back, charitable involvement or donations, whatever it might be. I want to do those things too. And I want my office to be this, not only a place where you can obtain insurance and financial services, but a beacon of positivity and hope within our community.
Yeah, I think a good analogy, and maybe I'm missing the mark here, but it's been on my mind as you're talking. A small pebble thrown into a large body of water can have a large ripple effect, and I think that's what your grandfather, your family has done, for here in Lebanon City, and you've impacted a lot of people. And like I said, going forward, I look to watch you grow and impact the community as well. We kind of hit on it a little bit, so maybe we'll skip this one, but I'll throw it out. How did you become an agent with State Farm? You mentioned, is there anything else you wanted to just note about that?
Yeah, and if I'm going to talk about State Farm, just as a disclosure, like anything that I say only reflects my point of view and personality, not State Farm. I just have to throw that out there. We're separate entities, even though we are one and the same in a lot of different ways, but yeah, so I kind of touched on that a little bit already, because I talked about how Hannah brought me into the fold as a team member in an office, where I learned how an office works, how sales works, how service works, how going above and beyond for a customer works. Even, sometimes when there are things that we don't normally do, something like somebody brings in their registration and they don't know how to fill it out. Like that's something so there are people that sometimes don't know how to do that. And that's where we step in and say, okay, like this is how you fill it in. And those are things that just come with the job. It's just part of the territory. But it was definitely an interesting journey. So I was with her for 5 years, and then I was contacted by the sales leader who's in charge of her territory of about 50 agents. And he said, hey, like you're doing pretty well. I think you should at least put your name in the system to get your name out there in the event that there's an opening. Not that anything's coming, but just put it out there and do the legwork now so it's done later, because you're doing pretty well. You've been with Hannah for a while. Your sales are great, your production's great, and Hannah's reported to me that you've really done a great job every year in growing and servicing people, and you just know the ecosystem really well. And I said, yeah, you know what? Why not? I mean, what do I have to lose? I'm just going to put my name in, my hat in the ring in the event that something does open up. And I wasn't expecting this year or next year, maybe, a couple years down the road, something will happen. So I went through that, and you have to take like a personality test and a couple other exams to make sure that you're a good fit. And then once you get through that, you're basically just in the system. In the event something opens up, you can kind of pick different territories, like all over the country, or locally, or you can pick whatever you want. So I just put it basically in this area because I'm born and raised here. I don't live that far from here. And I said, this is back in February of last year. So I was like, why not? Let's just see what happens.
Right.
Put my name in. Nothing happened for a while. A few months had gone by. The summer went by. Fall came around, and then I find out all of a sudden an agent locally here was taking a different job at the corporate level, and he was leaving. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I placed a phone call that day, and I said, hey, like, I saw this happen. We talk about it.
Mm-hmm.
And my sales leader was like, yeah, we need to have a conversation for sure if you want to set up like an interview, because there's a whole process involved with that.
Shout out to Hannah, right? Because without her, you wouldn't be where you're at, would you say? I would say, yeah. I mean, she's done so much for you. And shout out also to Bob Phillips. He's been a long time supporter of our high school programs that I mentioned earlier in the podcast. He's been a long time advertiser in them. Mm-hmm. So definitely shout out to both of them.
Yeah. So I find out a couple weeks later, they said, you're going to get an interview. You need to prep for it.
Okay. Right. Yep.
So there's a ton of things you have to do. You have to put a business plan together, crunch a bunch of numbers, that you have to put like an employee handbook together, a playbook for how you want your team to handle different situations so they know what to do in the event you're not there. There's a ton of documents that you have to create. You have to have all your ducks in a row. It took a lot. And it's interesting too, because the bigger thing that plays into this, I was going through some personal adversity at the time in my personal life. So I was not doing too hot, and it was some things that self-inflicted a little bit. Some things weren't, but irregardless, I was not doing too hot. And I was not in the greatest place, maybe mentally, and just struggling a little bit. And that was quite a journey to be able to prep myself and get all these things together when I was not doing the best that I knew I could be doing. And I noticed that at work, I wasn't always in a great mood, just because of external things going on in my life. Here I was, and I was able to get it all together. My interview was November, I think it was the 7th or the 5th or something like that. It was the first week in November. They said that's when your interview date is, so just make sure you have all your ducks in a row. All your documents are ready to go. Make sure they're submitted so we can look at them and just have your plan. And here comes November, and it's just really ironic. I actually drove home to my parents' house that night because I wanted to actually get to the office earlier to prep and things like that. So I stayed at their house because it's a little less of a commute. So here I was sitting at my parents' kitchen island looking at like a bathroom-sized mirror that I had propped up on the island so I could look at a face when I was like answering some fake interview questions that I made up, how I would answer them. And I remember my dad coming in the back door after he was at a meeting, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, like, "Just prepping for the interview. I want to look at a face." And he said, "Let me ask you the questions. Sit down with me.
All right.
Like, let's
a
practice little bit."
Exactly.
So we went through that, but it was really cool because that was the same place that I was sitting 5 years prior, when I was prepping to take my insurance license before Hannah even opened her office. So there I was.
Full circle.
I know, like, several years later, and I'm like, here I am again, but I'm at a completely different place now because of how much I applied myself and how much I wanted this. And it all comes back to when Hannah said, "I want to hire you with the intent that you leave me one day." And here I was doing that. So I went through that with my dad. I remember being very nervous that morning. I'm like sweating. I have a suit on, which I normally don't wear a suit. They were definitely more business casual, but I had the suit on. I remember that. And I went back into our private office room and hopped on a Zoom chat with 4 people from corporate. And it was definitely like I was a little intimidated, but not too bad because I already knew 2 of the people, but the other 2, I had no idea who they were. But it was definitely a little bit intimidating because I didn't know what to expect. So I can't really touch on what we talked about specifically as far as like business plan and goals and all those types of things. That's just to be compliant. I can't talk about it, but I remember not really having any expectations while it was happening because I thought to myself, you know what? I won with this because I did all the legwork. I'm prepped, and even if I don't get this, I'm ready for the next one. And this is a great learning experience, and I'm happy here working with Hannah, so I can't lose.
Yeah.
That's really how I walked into it, so I felt much more confident that no matter what happens. And I also, too, kind of had a perspective like, I'm going to do as well as I can, but I figured somebody who's older than me or with much more experience at State Farm than me or something was just going to get it because I know most State Farm agents are older than me.
Right.
They just are. I figured, hey, what's the worst that can happen? Let's
Yeah.
just go for it.
And I think you appeal, too, to a younger demographic, people in their maybe 20s, 30s, because personally I'd rather deal with somebody close to my age. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's something to say for experience and things like that, but, knowing you and like I said, being of a similar age, I feel like you wouldn't talk down to me. It would be more like a conversation in understanding insurance, because the next thing I want to kind of throw in there also is, act as though I don't know anything about insurance. Why do we need it?
It's a lot more important than people think. I'm not just saying that because I work in the field. I'm saying that because I see the other side of it when people either don't have enough or something happens in their life that's unforeseen. My mission with all of this is to help my customers recover from the unexpected and realize their goals and dreams. That's my mission statement. And how do we get there? So you need to have insurance, obviously, because it's required by law or a bank usually. But if you don't have what's adequate for you, then that could create a problem. I mean, it's really all comes down to protecting your assets and the people you love more than anything. As a State Farm agent, I want to know what your goals and dreams are. I want to know who your family members are. I want to know where you want to be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now, because if I don't know those things, I can't properly protect you to make sure that you get there. Because if something unforeseen does happen, like a car accident, like a house fire, something like that, it could alter your life, and then those goals and dreams fall to the wayside. So I don't want that to happen. The thing about insurance that kind of, I don't want to say irritates me, but I think is a shame is I'm not going to name anybody in any specific detail, but a lot of my competition, other insurance carriers, I think they've done a great job of turning insurance into a commodity. What I mean by that is people are so focused on price, and they look at it like a utility bill, and it's not. Your water company, your electric company, all those other services that you deal with for different things, those people aren't at those companies. They're not making you whole if something bad happens that you don't see coming. It's just a completely different ball game, and I just look at it. It's not a commodity. A lot of my competition focuses on online sales and doing things from a call center with, no offense to the people who work in those call centers. That's fine. I understand there's a job that needs to be filled to do that. But somebody in another state, I don't know how much they can relate to you because there's people in call centers. It's very robotic. They just want to get you set up, pay your bill, you're done.
Yeah.
We hope we don't hear from you again.
You're just a number. They don't care.
Yeah. And with State Farm, the business model is completely different, and it's a huge reason why State Farm's not a Fortune 500 company. It's a Fortune 40 company. And we believe in the agency model. We have local agents who are based in your community who care about who you are. I don't want to just set up your insurance over the phone and never talk to you again. When I get a call, I bring it up to the customer. I want you to come in. I want to get to know who you are, and I want to meet you face to face so I can go over all these things with you one more time before you sign the dotted line so you understand what you have and what you don't have. And I want to know what your goals are, what your dreams are, all these other things that come along with it. Because if I don't do that, I'm not doing my job, and then I'm no different than my competition. So that's how we differentiate. And State Farm's been the number one insurance company in the country, and this is our 100th year. We've been number one in auto insurance for 80 years.
Wow.
We're not always the cheapest.
Right.
It's not the reason why people come to us. They come to us because of our service, because we have a local presence, and we offer peace of mind. And somebody like me and my staff who's going to go that extra mile for you, that somebody maybe in a call center or a robot on your laptop responding to you isn't going to do.
Right.
So we offer a unique value proposition. and that's why we are number one.
There you go, and that's how you differentiate yourself from the competition. I know I've been following you on your social medias and seeing, friends that I know. I think Ty the Barber, he was recently in, and
He was.
Yeah, and that goes a long way, because then it's like, okay, my wife and I just had a baby girl, and she's like, hey, maybe we should talk to Cooney, talk to Adam about, what we need to do for her and things like that. So it gets the ball rolling. It gets your mind thinking, because you always want to be on people's minds.
Yeah, and that's a huge reason why I share, especially friends on social media who give me the okay to do it, because people our age especially, or even people younger than us, I feel that they want to be seen doing things on social media, or they want to be seen doing something, like making an accomplishment or doing something. I want to acknowledge that. I think that is a huge market inefficiency. There aren't really any other insurance companies either here in the area, in the immediate area, or around me that I really know of that are featuring customers online and writing up a little story about them or a little blurb. And making it really relatable, because then when I share it, they share it, and then it gets exposure.
Grows. Yep.
I just had somebody this weekend say to me, hey, I saw so-and-so was in. I think we should probably sit down with you too. And it was just kind of because they saw it. So I was like, yeah, absolutely. And I tucked my card in his pocket and said, in his shirt pocket, and said, yeah, call me.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that I can really tap into, because I'm 30 years old, so I'm a millennial. I want to tap into those things that maybe your mom and dad's insurance company aren't doing. And I feel like I can really connect with millennials and Gen Z people, or anybody, especially because of my family history. So I feel like I really offer something unique because of my roots and my ties, but also because of my age, that I can connect with somebody maybe the way somebody else at another insurance company can't. I want to put you on social media. I want to do that stuff. I want to get your picture with Jake, or if you come in and grab a koozie or whatever it is. I mean, I like doing stuff like that, and I know if I was doing something like that, I'd want to be recognized for it. I think it's really cool, and it's something I want to take advantage of, because I just think it's something unique that not a lot of people in my industry are doing.
I know it's been a little while, but would you say COVID had any effect on your life, on your business at all? What you're doing here with State Farm?
COVID didn't really have that much of an impact on my life, to be completely honest. Other than maybe inconveniences that were things like, oh, I can't go to a bar, or I can't go to a restaurant. Things that people in our age demographic were inconvenienced by more than anything. So luckily, nothing severe. It was more inconveniences than anything. We actually did really well. I was at Hannah's office still at the time during COVID when it hit, but we actually did very well. It was surprising, but we kind of noticed that was like the first year people were at home so much, so they actually were like reading their insurance documents maybe more.
Okay.
Like if they were with another carrier, so they started paying attention to things a little bit, and they're sitting at home, so they're like, well, I might as well shop.
Yeah.
So we did really, really well during COVID, especially like 2020 and 2021. We did very well. We did better than the previous years before that. So yeah, that's the interesting thing about insurance. It's kind of insulated from, we definitely see trends and other things that impact us from the economy or other things that are out of our hands, but we're actually very lucky to be in this industry, to be kind of insulated, because at the end of the day, we all need it. Yeah. It's a matter of how much and what kind do you need.
Exactly.
I feel very fortunate, and that's one of the intriguing things about the industry that brought me in, was the insulation from factors that we can't control, that other careers or job paths were very impacted by COVID, but people still needed us every day. I was very lucky.
So having your own business and being the face of your own State Farm agency, what is your daily routine like? Because I know before we started recording, we have some Bullet bourbon we're sipping on here, and you said
very good.
From Monday through Friday, whatever, 3-4 o'clock before you get off work, you don't really drink. It's something you do personally. So what's your daily routine like?
So I'm really breaking habit here by drinking this, but it's pretty good. So I'll make an exception for this, but yeah, that's something I usually do. Just kind of to stay in shape and keep the pounds off and look in a certain way.
Yeah.
For physical physique, I guess. But Yeah, get up in the morning, 7:30, give or take, and get ready. I'm in my office usually 8:30, 8:45, in between there at some point. And then it varies. Every day can be different, and it depends what's coming in and going out. But on an average day, I get in, I'm checking to see if there's customers that have emailed me overnight, if there's anything that needs to be addressed. My primary goal is to sit down with customers to go over their insurance and essentially do what's called an insurance and financial review to make sure that they're covered the way they want to be, that there's nothing out there that they're not aware of that they could have that they don't realize or anything like that. I don't like to leave stones unturned. And what I always say to people over the phone, it's gotten robotic, but I always say to my customers, if I'm trying to get them to come in or sit down with them at a later date, I always say, I don't want you to ever come in here and say, Adam, why did I not know about this? Or why did I not have this? Because now I have a problem. I go over every little detail of your policy down to every coverage on your home, auto, whatever it is. And I make you aware of what you have and what you don't have. I have 2 sheets that I fill out. I highlight what people have, and then leave open what they don't. And then I just go over line by line. This is what you have. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but these are the ramifications if something happens. If something does happen, how are you handling it? And I shut up and let them talk.
Very
I have
beneficial.
to ask a lot of open-ended questions to figure out where people want to be. And I just want to get to know them on a personal level because that helps with keeping customers around longer. I want to develop relationships that last decades. If I'm not sitting and meeting with my customers and having these reviews and then also penning a note out for every 2 years to reach out to do it again, because the odds are your life is going to change over 2 years, I need to know about what's happened.
Right.
So I have a note for every customer penned it out 2 years. You can come in if you want to. If you don't, that's fine. I'll notate it. But if I'm not doing that, I'm not differentiating from my competition, and I'm not doing my job. I take that to heart, and that's a huge thing that I do. But more of what I do also is coaching my team. My team doesn't have an insurance background. They came in brand new. So there is a lot of coaching involved with that, but they've come a long way. Shout out to Joe and Vinny, by the way, in case they listen to this. You guys are awesome. I have 2 great team members on my team. Joe is one of them, and then Vinny, like I had said, is another one. Vinny's a Lebanon High grad. They are 2 awesome human beings. That's what I was looking for more than anything.
Okay.
In my interview process, with people who are good people. First and foremost, the insurance background, that's great if you have it, but that's not a deal breaker for me. I wanted to hire 2 great people. And those 2 guys exemplify it in every way. And I said, you know what, if you don't have the background, we'll figure that out later.
Yeah. So what do they do for you? And I didn't mean to cut you off, but when I hear Joey and Vinny, I think of some Italian mobsters. I got to be honest.
You know what?
Yeah,
I was actually going to say that because it came to my mind one day when I was sitting at my desk. It sounds like I have the mob backing me up.
It kind of does.
And if there's a problem, I'll have Joe and Vinny deal with
That's
you.
what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually kind of funny how that works. They're really unique guys, though. Joe's a little bit older than me. He's a family man. Great guy. He kind of fell out of the sky and was looking for a job at the hospital. He knew he had a family member that worked there and asked my dad if there was something available. My dad said no, but I know somebody who is hiring. It's my son.
Yeah.
So I talked to him, and right after one conversation, I was like, okay, I think there's something here. And then I met him in person. I said, this is a great guy. So I brought him on, and then Vinny. He's actually in the Navy Reserves. He was in the Navy for a few years. He was stationed in Japan, and now he's also a volunteer firefighter over at Neversink.
Whoa, okay.
So he is very regimented and dedicated, and he's been a great addition with no background, but he's very coachable, and I could not ask for a better staff, and that is something that will make or break you as a State Farm agent, is your staff. And I heard a mantra one time that I really like is the name is on the door because of the people inside.
Ooh, I like that.
And that is true, so much so because of my staff. And I am so grateful for the 2 of those guys. They go above and beyond to make sure that our customers are taken care of. And I can't speak enough about how much I appreciate them. Two great guys. So if anybody ever deals with them or knows them, they're great guys.
Shout out to Joey and Vinny, and Vinny, thank you for your service. And I think life is all about connections, who you know, and early on you really hit the nail on the head. My grandfather here at Colortech is known for saying people buy from people, and like you mentioned, it's those relationships that you and your team make with local people here throughout Lebanon County, that'll have the biggest impact and will get you that repeat business, for lack of a better term.
Sure.
So that's huge. So I wanted to transition over to, why do you personally do what you do day in and day out?
Oh, that's a big question.
Yeah.
That's deep. So I think about that day of my interview that I was talking about earlier, because like I had said before, I was not doing too hot personally at that time. And I still remember to this day at the end of the interview, like we went through it, and then at the very end, like I said, I really can't share many of the details of it, but at the very end, they said, the floor is yours. And I basically looked at all of them and I said, gentlemen, I have a very unique proposition that somebody else isn't going to have that you talk to. Mm-hmm. And it's my family legacy and my roots here. And I told my grandpa's story a little bit. And I said, I carry this burden on me, for lack of a better term, that I want to do right by all the things that he did. And I just looked at them and I said, you can put all the pressure on me that you want to. I understand there's pressure that comes with this territory. It's a huge responsibility, but I've been putting pressure on myself my entire life because of who I am and the family I was born in. And I chose to. I didn't have to, but I was that kid. I couldn't be that kid getting in the police log or getting in trouble because of who I'm related to. I did not want to let these people down.
Exactly.
Who've done so much. So that was a huge thing for me. And I still remember to this day, at the very end of the interview, I gave my spiel and they said, we'll call you in a week. And I said, okay, perfect. I got out of there. I was relieved. I didn't care what the results were in a week. But I remember I was sitting at my desk. I was doing some work, and it was about 4 o'clock that afternoon. And my cell phone starts ringing. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is this? And it's a number I don't know. So I went outside. I still remember sitting on the cold stoop outside of Hannah's office on the side of her building. It was her sales leader, and he said, how do you think you did today? And I said, I think I did pretty good for the most part. Mm-hmm. I said, I think there's a couple things I could have done better in, but I said, overall, I think I did well. And he said, yeah, we were all really impressed with what you had to say. And he said, you're going to be a State Farm agent. Whoa. And I started shaking a little bit.
I was going to say, your emotions got to be high. You got to be whoa. Yeah.
I started shaking a little bit, and I just couldn't believe it because I didn't expect it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what to say. I was lost for words. And I can remember finishing up that call, and I walked over to my car, and I sat in my car for a second. And I am a very even-keeled guy. I really don't get super emotional very often, but I remember sitting there in my car, and it all just kind of came out because all the prep that I did, all the late nights, all the things that were going on in my life personally that were not ideal, I kind of pulled myself out of this pit and figured out how to be the best version of myself at my lowest point. And I never forget that. And I remember sitting there in my car thinking to myself, if I can do that, I can do anything. So that was really, really critical for me. And that's still something that I think about to this day because that was the most monumental day of my life to that point.
Oh, it's huge. Yeah.
I mean, just to have my name on the door of a business, because I made a Facebook post the night before I started, kind of like a tribute to my grandpa. I went to all the places that he put our family name somewhere. He's the Lebanon High Hall of Fame, the banner that he has up there for that, the Lebanon Valley College Hall of Fame. He's out at Fort Indian Town Gap. I took a picture of that, and then also the Country Club pool is named after him. So I went and I took pictures of all of that and basically paid homage to him by saying you've put our name on all these different places in the community, and now I get to do that.
Yeah.
I really feel the weight of that, and again, I can kind of feel it in my chest.
You can't help but get emotional
when I talk about that, because it means something to me.
Exactly. Yep.
And I remember that when I started my my internship program, where you basically go through 4 months of college, for lack of a better term, like State Farm college, to be an agent. You're a team member for so many years, but then when you're an agent, it's completely different. Your role is different. So they basically break you down to build you back up. And I remember on the first day, I'm in a Zoom with like 100 other interns and some coaches from corporate. And on the first day, they say, "What's your why? Why are you doing this?" And it can't be money, because that's going to wear out. So what's your why? And I'm sitting there like, oh man, I am armed with the perfect answer.
Yeah.
And it's really all these things that I've shared with you to this point. So when I got on, the stage, I shared that. And so some of the corporate coaches were like, wow, like that's really cool. So that's definitely something that stands out to me, of what gets me up in the morning, is definitely things like that. And just the unique value proposition that State Farm offers. I think I've aligned myself with a great brand and a great company, and I protect it just as much as my own family legacy. So I have two things that I'm really trying to protect and honor.
Yeah.
That maybe somebody else is not, with their job or business or whatever it is they do. So I think that's something that every day I get up and I think about that. And it's really weird. I remember there was this day when our signage finally got put up on our new location on Springwood Drive, and my name is on the glass door, and I'm walking back towards the building, but the sunlight's so bright that it puts my name like on the wall. And I remember just like looking back past the wall, and my name is showing up there, like in the shadow of it from the glass door.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy smokes. Like, it was just one of those moments where it hits me and I'm like, this is real.
Mm-hmm.
So I finally got my name on that door, which is what I always wanted.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. That's what gets me up in the morning. That's my why. It's
your business, your family legacy, and combining it to make it your truth, and you can, just from the conversation here, you're not just blowing smoke. Like I can tell you generally care about the people here in Lebanon County and Lebanon City and the work you're doing here. So now in the form to be on the podcast, you had put this, and I just want to get your take on it. The saying, invest in yourself. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, so that's a really relative statement, and it's definitely different for everybody. But what I would say it means is finding your passion and pursuing it. And what that to me means is network as much as possible, because from what I have found in my experience, it's almost more valuable to know people than what you know. I've gotten to where I am because of my network, more so than my degree that I got from Temple. Not trying to devalue it or anything like that, but the connections my dad made ended up getting me a babysitter, that ended up getting me a boss, that ended up putting me here.
Right.
So network and get to know as many people as you possibly can, and make a great first impression, even if nothing comes out of it, because you never know what could come out of it down the road. And you only get one chance to make a great first impression. I would also say, in addition to that, operate with intention and be deliberate about it. If you're going to do something, do it. Don't do it halfway and think that you're going to get the same results as somebody who does it 100%. But ultimately, invest in others, and that will be the best investment in yourself that you can make. And it will pay dividends in more way than one. And I think that's like the biggest thing. Investing in yourself is really investing in others, because I've seen it and I lived it, and I've watched it happen with my parents and how many things they've done for people that people have paid them back in ways that they didn't even see coming, like odd favors or whatever it is. You never know if you're going to be in a pinch with something that you don't see coming. You're in a tough spot, and you have a network of people that you can pull on that can help lift you up. And I'm seeing that now as an employer with 2 team members. I am always trying to lift them up, coach them, get them compensated as much as possible, make sure they're in an environment that they love to be at. Here's a great example. This is just something small, but like Vinny, he is a big snacker, like more than a big meal guy. So I always make sure I have a basket of like all different kinds of snacks for him at work. So I'll order like a care package from Amazon that's full of all different stuff. I'll go to the grocery store, and like Joe, he's a big diet iced tea drinker. So I'll go, and if I'm picking up groceries for the business, I'll get him a gallon of iced tea every now and then. I do little things like that because I want them to feel at home. I want them to feel welcome, and I want them to feel like they're really a part of something and they're invested in something. So investing in people is huge, and I'm always trying to make sure that they're happy and mentally healthy and that they like what they do and that I'm there for them whenever they need something. So I'm seeing it differently now than I ever have. It's different when you employ people, for sure.
Right. Oh, yeah, I think you're definitely doing it right, and it's those little things that add up, and it makes, employees feel like you really do care, and they're really a part of the team, or maybe even a part of the family. You know what I mean? It's going that extra mile. So now how can our listeners connect with you and follow along on your journey?
Yeah, so we have a company, Facebook and Instagram, that you can follow. Our Instagram handle is Kuhn Insurance, Kuhn. And then on Facebook, we're Kuhn SF, as in State Farm. And then also our website, kuhnsf.com, so KUHNS as in state, F as in farm.com. So those are the best ways to follow along with what we're doing.
Before we close out, is there anything else that you'd like the listeners to know?
Yeah, I'd like to say if anybody out there wants some added value to their life and a different perspective on insurance and financial service, to please reach out to me. Email me at adam@kuhnsf.com. Shoot me a message from my website. You can reach out to me on Facebook as well. I guarantee that you will walk in and get a different experience than you would at some other insurance company or office, and you will learn something. Whether you set up business with me or not, you will learn something that you did not know, and you may learn something that makes you uncomfortable that I will have a solution for, which I think is absolutely critical. And in addition to that, like I've already said, I have an awesome team in place. It's really dedicated and hardworking. They will also help you if you want to come in and sit down with any of us. And if you do want to do some business with us, you will always have an agent and a team who personally knows you and what you care about. Not only upholds the integrity of State Farm and its brand, but also my family legacy and my family name, which means everything to me.
Adam, I'm excited to see what you're going to do for the community here throughout Lebanon and watching you grow your State Farm agency. And we'll close it out here. Adam Kuhn on the American Grown podcast in the Colortech Creative Solutions studios. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Austin. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
This was fun.
To see photos of today's guests and more content, just search American Grown Podcast on Facebook and Instagram. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review.
If you'd like to be a featured guest on the podcast, please direct message or email Austin at americangrownpod@gmail.com.